Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of In Lay Terms. I'm your host, Payman Ascari, and today we have with us PPC, our very own PPC candidate, Mr. Jeff Galbraith. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well, Payman. Thank you for the invitation.
No, thank you very much for making the time to come on. Jeff, to get things started, can you tell the audience a little about yourself?
Uh, I am relatively new in the whole political realm world. I'm 62 years old, and I've had enough of the political landscape that we're all experiencing right now. I put my name in the application process through the PPC headquarters, and I was acclaimed in November of 2023 after meeting their requirements, and I'm the record candidate of record for Mission MATSQUI ABBOTSFORD.
So, you have you ever had any political experience before?
I've had almost zero. I did try running for alderman once, but that was short lived and it didn't amount to anything. But this is my first full on experience in the whole political uh, realm, if that's what you want to call it. So I spent most of my life voting, and always voting for what, like most Canadians, what we wanted to hear, and here's where we are today. So I'm looking to. Like most Canadians, change is imminent, and I just want to be a part of that change to for the future. I have children and grandchildren, and what I've seen happening is not what I want to leave for them.
Yeah, I hear that from a lot of the PPC candidates, actually. I myself, I sometimes wonder why I'm running. I don't have kids, yet I find myself talking about like the future. So it's strange. I also I don't want to leave this world worse than what I came into. Um, Go ahead.
Yeah, I think
Comments.
I mean, sometimes we watch movies, and certain times movies will put a message out there to people, and those who are aware and awake will hear that message, and wow, it'll hit them like um, a rock between the eyes. I was watching Kingdom of Heaven one time with Orlando Bloom, and the 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 gist of the movie was, what kind of a man would I be if I didn't try and improve my world? Or what man is a man if he doesn't improve his world?
Kingdom of Heaven. That's a fantastic movie. Did you watch the director's cut or the regular version?
I believe it's a director's cut.
That part where they Salahuddin decapitates that guy.
Yeah,
That was insane.
yeah. I mean,
Oh.
but I mean, yeah. I mean, sometimes, but that's in the realms of war, isn't it? Take no prisoners. Well, I mean, but the thing is when you do bad, you deserve to be. Karma deserves to visit you uh, when you do bad things, and it's that old it's that new saying that it's finally coming around. It's a time when good men are going to have to do bad things to bad people.
People have to step up.
Yeah.
On the issue of war,
Yes.
let's do a hard pivot. I didn't know, but you were in the Canadian Armed Forces. Tell us about that.
Yes. I did a time. I right out of high school. I graduated. I graduated. What I think it was June 27th and July 6th. I was on an airplane headed for basic training in Cornwallis, Nova Scotia. I did a stint, and as I always say, um, and it was a learning curve, and uh, obviously I made a decision not to not to re-enlist, and go from there. So I learned. I tell a lot of people I learned how to drink and get in trouble. So I just let's just call this an experience and leave it at that. So
There's actually another PPC candidate, Robert Bard, up in Edmonton, and he's a former, I believe he was a former lieutenant, but
okay,
I don't know
yeah.
my ranks. What rank did you reach?
Well, I was just a non-commissioned officer. Just so I was a lowly private, or as we call them in the Navy, ordinary seaman, and that's
Sorry,
that
I
was the
chuckled
gist
there.
of
Yeah. Uh,
it.
uh,
Yeah,
Jeff, let me get your opinion on. I've never been in the military, so I'm not really a military guy. But everybody is screaming left, right, and center that Trudeau has defunded the military, destroyed the Canadian Armed Forces. What's your view?
absolutely. His whole there's no. I mean, for those of us that have spent time previously, and there is a mad rush for the door right now to retire, to leave, um, and it's all part of this DEI initiative that the government is encouraging, and I'm going to put that encouraging on the Canadian Armed Forces. Um, there's no, I mean, the ship I was on, the HMCS Rescue, it was 40 years old when I was on it, and it was they just retired, decommissioned it, stripped it. I think it was probably about 10 years ago, and so it was long serving, long, like way past its prime, as most of our military equipment is. And if they expect us to, engage in exercises or conflicts, um, we have to have better equipment, better tools, and so I mean that's I guess so that's what the issue with the Canadian Armed Forces is there's no pride um, per se, except those that have served and those that remember um, serving. Um, and so I mean, but again, it's the dollars and cents that is so important. If you're not, if you can't expect your troops, your force to engage properly and make it out alive if you're not going to provide the right tools, the right equipment uh, to make that happen. So,
For people who, like me, have no idea how the military works, well, what would you say to the argument? Well, Canada, we have the safest border in the world. We have the United States of America. Why do we need a military? We can just piggyback off of theirs. What would you say?
um, I think going forward, uh, Canada needs a national security force for protection. Okay, and for civil unrest, for natural disasters. Um, I mean, we've had floods here in the Lower Mainland. The forces were called in to assist. Forest fires, the forces are called in to assist. You know, any other. I mean, and that's really, and regarding protection of borders, uh, what the United States is not protecting their borders right now. So
Yeah.
it's just I mean, going forward, I mean, it's we Canada requires a national security force. Hopefully we never have. Hopefully we'll never have to use it in foreign conflicts, but we definitely need a national security force for natural disasters and those kinds of things.
All right. And I guess given the recent events with the RCMP refusing to prosecute politicians for treason, you prefer it not to be the RCMP.
Well, there needs to be. there needs to be, something that needs to be done. And I think, part of the issue is who are they swearing oath to? If you go and look at the swearing of oaths for the RCMP and the Canadian Armed Forces, they swear an oath to the monarchy. So really, the people of Canada are not their main focus. It's they've it's that their oath to protect the Governor General, the Prime Minister, and the monarchy and her representatives and all the MPs and so on and so forth. So as long and as well as the Canadian Armed Forces. So um, that's just where I'm coming from, and that's just my opinion. So that would have to be addressed, and I'm and on most military and structural uh, 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 it's a pyramid, so they're all looking at top down, or it's always bottom up in relation to uh, direction and obedience. So
I'm sensing what you're saying is sort of we need a "we the people" clause in there where they support the Constitution and not the monarch.
exactly, exactly.
I had I had a conversation with a woman yesterday, and she said the same thing. We were talking about the RCMP and how can we reform it, and her suggestion was, the need to declare an oath to the people. Taking it further, like, what are your views on our Constitution, for example? I don't know if you've read the BNA Act. It's just this big like textbook. I think it's 70 pages long.
It's quite involved, and the thing is uh, there are certain aspects of it that don't even relate to today's Canada. And the thing is like there were amendments and there were things made to the British North America Act that are no longer legal jurisdiction. So the thing is the Bill of Rights that John Diefenbaker laid out are more attuned to the people of Canada than the British North America Act. The British North America Act was based on Britain's requirements for the colonies, not on what the colonies were that the colonies at that time wanted to make happen. So the British North America Act is totally a moder- developed by the British Parliament. So it's what it's what they wanted to take away from Canada instead of what they were going to do for Canada or what they wanted to see for Canada.
Yeah, I did an interview with Doug Force.
Amazing. Um,
You know the guy?
yes,
Yeah.
amazing man, and like, it just blew my mind. Blew my mind.
Go watch I'll send you the link. You can go watch it. He is an expert on Canadian the charter, the Constitution. But
His myth is Canada.
yeah, the myth is Canada. I've watched a lot of his clips on there on BitChute. Not everyone agrees with it,
Nope.
and but I think there's merit to it that the country kind of expired in 1933, and then we're just chugging along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he, I Druthers newspaper. I got a copy one time, and his the story that I saw was about the myth is Canada, and the BNA Act and Queen Victoria. The BNA Act they stated that the BNA Act died when Queen Victoria died. So in 1901. So because there were no heirs allowed to inherit the monarchy, because she didn't want that. So anyway, and again, of course, the government at the time kept that all hush hush, and and then all the governments that ensued kept it all hush hush. So we've been actually being ran by a de facto government, running as if they're a legal entity, and they're really not. So whether I mean, so I don't know. I mean, if that's all going to come out eventually, and how it will, but people need to know that that all these laws. I mean, like all these laws that they're making. All these cyber laws and health laws and everything else. It's all de facto. It's just fear mongering and freedom taking and perceived, anyways. So yeah, we
So
got a lot of work.
before before actually starting the interview with our, we have a whole host of questions to ask you, but on the same line of, the myth is Canada. Do you think we can, if Daniel Smith succeeds, do you think that that's going to lead to a constitutional convention or maybe like separation of Alberta?
I I mean, if I think that is really important, and here's what I think Danielle Smith is leading them in the right. Um, I mean, I think she's doing what she needs to do for Alberta. Okay, whether she's, I mean, again, there are stories that come out that she's only doing it so far, and then the foreign entities will take over and everything else, and so I mean, I just hope that Alberta is keeping her under wrap or under control, so that she doesn't, I mean, who knows who's in whose corner anymore. And it's just like, again, as I'm 60 years old, so I've been around the political, not around, but watching the political landscape go from conservatives to liberal, back to conservatives, back to liberals, and then we find out that over the last since Mulroney that we've been sold out. So foreign entities have been lining their pockets, the politicians' pockets, since Mulroney. And everybody's getting their piece of the pie. But in regards to Alberta, I think every province should take their sovereignty and run with it. And let's start afresh and let Alberta look after Albertans, and let a real Victoria look at, or another uh, party in British Columbia look after British Columbia, and Saskatchewan look after Saskatchewan. Um, but no. But I like the idea. I mean, Quebec has been doing it for years. They've been running their own show for years, and yet here we are. We have a separatist party in the House of Commons that are, voting on national issues. I have an issue with that. So
Um, okay, let's explore that more. What's your, what's your position or your view on Quebec vis-a-vis Canada?
uh, what do you mean my position?
You said you have an issue with a separatist party in the federal
Yeah,
politics.
yeah.
What should happen?
Any separate. I mean, if you want to, the thing is like it's a national House of Commons. Um, and my issue is that you have a separatist party whose only focus is on Quebec. You know, uh, and yet they're allowed to vote on bills and legislation focused on all the other provinces. I mean, like the recent carbon tax, the heating oil carbon tax, um, uh, that it was a couple of months ago when it was brought up that the House of Commons would relieve some of the carbon tax for the maritime provinces. Um, but then when Manitoba and Saskatchewan and Alberta said no, we want the same deal on heating. We don't want to. Quebec said no. So Quebec supported the Liberal government in saying, no, you don't get that same deal. So,
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like you cannot, when you're a leader of a federal or national party, you can't just support your own province only.
right. I mean, how is that fair? How is that respect? How is that responsible?
So, Jeff, I want to go back to. I agree with you, and I like your position. I want to go back to what you said about Mulrooney. You said that all of these problems started with Mulrooney. Why do you single that prime minister out?
He signed us on to Agenda 2015, which is a United Nations initiative. In 2008, that's what he did. In I believe it was in Brazil, and so here we are. We're on a slippery slope to globalism, and he got the ball rolling here in Canada.
So the I don't even know what they're calling it now. The SDGs, the
Yeah,
Sustainable Development
yeah.
Goals, or what is your what's your issue with it, or explain to the audience why you don't like it?
Well, I mean, sustainable development goals has a price. So, I mean, the thing is and 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 all as we're experiencing the diversity, equity, and inclusion of Agenda 2030 is ensuring that a smaller segment of society has greater power than the majority. Um, and it's the thing is it's just something like I did a whole blog on it, and it's yeah, they're saying it's for the good of the country, but it's not the good of the country when we have mass immigration of people that are coming from countries that don't share the same ideals or um, cultural instincts that are that have already been established. Um, Sustainable development goals um, are not sustainable. Um,
The irony.
exactly. Um, I mean, I live in a really heavy agriculture industry, dairy and corn and hay, um, and it's I'm seeing a lot of farms being sold, and these are generational farms. These have been in the families for a couple of centuries. Or so it's really disheartening to see all these farms just being plowed under and livestock being sold off. Or the last flood we had in 2019, November of 2019, um, we lost. There was a lot of I think it was a number like 600,000 cows, dairy cows were killed during the floods, were died during the floods. They were trapped. So all those farmers and the federal government still hasn't come made uh, promised a restitution to those farmers. So what happened to all that money that was promised? So sustainable development goals are not sustainable.
I like that. That's a bumper sticker. Jeff, you're probably the fifth person this week I've heard tell me that they're just getting rid of farmland and they're building condominiums or houses, townhouses. Uh, how does this work? Like in life, like I assume you have farmland on the outskirts, and then the city encroaches upon the farmland, so you go open new farmland somewhere. But now they're why are we creating new farmland, or are we just wiping it out?
It looks like we're just wiping it out. Um, And what I'm seeing, I live in Chilliwack, and what I'm seeing here is over the last 5 years, I've seen an increase in home construction. We used to have a cemetery over on, and it was surrounded by green space. It is now all developed, multifamily homes in several locations, and it's just phenomenal. I mean, like people who have lived here for 10 years can't believe our infrastructure isn't sustainable. We're like I said, we're a farming community, mostly agricultural, and yet we have all these homes that are being built. My question is where are the jobs going to come from to afford to pay the mortgages or the rents that are going to be required to live in these places? Because there's thousands. I'm going to say at least 1,000 new homes here just in Chilliwack, and in just a certain segment of Chilliwack. So, and our population isn't very large, but it looks like they want it to be large. There's been talk that it's on the list of being a 15-minute city. So that's kind of concerning. But and like I said, most of these farms, if they are being sold, are not being reused. They're just going to die. They're going to go to seed, so to speak. Um, so,
But these plots that they're designated agricultural zoning, right?
well, yeah, but if you've got enough money, I mean, and that's what we're seeing. If you've got enough money, you can make anything go away. And that's part of this Agenda 2030. A lot of the mayors are, you know, uh, uh, are looking at the opportunity you know, of seeing what they can do, for their community, not for their community, but of their community. Like I mean, like there was no reason to build all these places unless there was a need for it or an outside influence for it. So. Uh, I think as we've seen on the news, the foreign interference and foreign influence in our federal government. I think it goes broader than that. I think we're looking at it it's in the provincial, it's in the local civil levels too. Um, that's just my opinion. So
Uh, I want to come back to that, but before I do, I don't know anything about farming. You said you're in a farming
yeah.
community. When you wipe out farmland in Chilliwack, is all of BC farmable? Like, where else? Where do you go after Chilliwack to farm?
Well, I mean, the whole lower Fraser Valley is prime farmland. It used to be a floodplain. And so years ago, century ago, they dug a drainage canal to eliminate the floodplain. So they brought in a bunch of uh, Europeans to farm the area who knew how to farm, and it's mostly Mennonite. And so, again, so this is going back 100 years, and they've been farming and it's mostly dairy and corn and hay. So um, yeah. So, so where do they go here? Who knows? And maybe the powers that be, maybe the powers that be have a new supplier of dairy and corn and hay products uh, grown elsewhere that will cost even more to get to market. Um, so why somebody would do that? That's I don't know. I mean, that's a great question. Why would somebody harm a current producing, thriving farm, um, other than for personal gain, to eliminate competition?
All right. I guess we can leave the agricultural lesson behind us and move on to foreign interference. Uh, the mayor of Edmonton, he spent 18 months in jail in India for he was accused of terrorism. Maybe he was innocent. I don't know. Maybe it was a false charge, but like there's corruption at the municipal level. There's corruption at the federal level. We got 11 MPs. Like you said, there's probably corruption at the provincial level. Do you remember Canada being this bad? I've only been here since '89.
Do I remember? I mean, the leader of the NDP is not allowed back in India, so or in the United States. So no, no. I never ever thought that we would see the day where we would have this type of but again, I look at it, and part of it is apathy and complacency. I think that's really come on over the last 30 or 40 or 50 years, that people just quit thinking about what the government was doing. The government, the whole thing, the government's going to do what the government does, and there's nothing we can do about it. Well, here we are, because of that thinking. And we have people who have been selected, um, and to do what they're told. So, but to answer your question, no, I've never thought or heard the the level of corruption in government. So, but again, maybe it always has been, and we just were never told. Um, so maybe new technology has just opened the floodgates of information, whereas before, when I was a young man, it was either newspapers or books or news stories, but they were always written by the winners and you know again, as we know and learned, history is written by the winners, and it's only their story and how they saw things. So here we are.
Jeff, with respect to freedom, and you were talking about the charter, the previous Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada, I think her name is McLaughlin. She said something to the effect in the Globe and Mail. She said, "In a free democratic society, freedoms are not absolute; they have to be limited." What's your response to that?
Then it's not freedom. If freedoms have to be, if freedoms have to be absolute, uh, well, I mean, I mean, you'd have to look at each situation. I mean, like, uh, it's interesting. So people should have the freedom to walk around naked downtown. What gives a pride parade any difference over normal everyday life? Exposing yourself. Um, during a like how is that any different? Like what makes a pride parade any different? What type of freedom? um it's I think that can be a slippery slope for a lot of people. Well, if he can do it, why can't I? you know if they can do it, why can't we? And so, and to someone to have to say, and I think freedoms need to be I think referendums. I think that the freedom to hold the freedom to hold a referendum on various applications of law, uh, need to be brought in, because there's a lot of Canadians who believe they have a right to say something, but when you elect somebody to say something and then they don't do it, then your voice isn't being heard. So freedom is relative, I suppose, to, I guess, certain cultures. A freedom to, like the indigenous believe they have the freedom to fish and hunt, um, without regard to seasons and everything else. I mean, that's, so, and I don't deny that. Um, and so but we have to be careful. I mean, because judges, as we've witnessed over the last little while, with the exception of a few, uh, they're appointed on merit by a government that has lost all credibility. So I think some judgments are questionable, very questionable.
Sticking with the courts, um, I'm going to give my opinion, but feel free to disagree. I don't see how it is that we can have codified rights in the charter, like mobility rights, and then the judge steps in and says, "No, Section 1, we're going to get rid of that right." And then you have, simultaneous to that, you have another judge that says, "Oh, this doctor has the constitutional charter right to kill his patients." So they create MAID. What's your view on that? What's your view on MAID?
It's that slippery slope, isn't it? It's the freedoms. Um, I'm not. I mean, like the thing is I don't even think the charter is even the charter. I mean, uh, uh, my understanding is that in order for the charter had to be ratified by all the premiers at that time. The charter was not ratified by all the premiers at the time. Pierre Trudeau uh, 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 he played it like it was, but René Lévesque did not sign the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. He was a holdout because he didn't like Section 5.1. And so, is the Charter of Rights and Freedoms a legitimate Charter of Rights and Freedom? Or was that all just pomp and circumstance to have the Queen come here and sign off, and Pierre Trudeau signed off, and everything else? So, um, but maybe that's why our Charter of Rights are being stomped on ad nauseum every time it gets into a court of law. Um, some judges are good thinking and can do it, and are able to decipher uh, the legalities of everything, where other judges are just um, put in place to support um, the government mandates, and so.
Let's move on to the economy. Another depressing subject. I'm going off memory here, but I think we have 2.5 trillion GDP, about 1.5 trillion debt, and every year we pay 50 billion interest payments on that debt. How much of the misery of, like the low birth rates, the suicide, all of that is because, and the fact that people can't afford homes is because of the interest payments?
I think it has everything to do with everything. Um, we have uh, we have people who are being taxed into poverty um, to service a debt um, that's inexcusable, um, and it's such a shame that families are going hungry. Birth rates are down. And all this, gender ideology and transitionism uh, is a way to populate the country. Um, and I just it's people again, when you give when you give your tax dollars away instead of helping your own people, and I think that's what the problem is we're being taxed to death to help outside nations, outside countries, to pay off a debt that wasn't even ours to begin with. um, and so we have people that are just they're tired, they're fed up, they're frustrated, they're disillusioned. They don't they don't want to do this anymore. They're walking away from mortgages, they're walking away from their homes, they're walking away from their families. um, and the government, and the reason why the government is pushing maids so much, especially on the more senior population, is because uh, pension pension dollars that they're paying out. They can scoop those up, especially if there's nobody to claim it. So, and so, and the thing is, it's like odious debt. I don't know if you've ever heard of the term odious debt. I mean, it's just it's a term that was that if uh, brought in that if debt is odious debt when a newly elected government or a new system is put in place in a country. The new system, the new government can say we're not honoring this debt, so it gets written off in the IMF. And basically, what the country does is give the middle finger to the International Monetary Fund. You can take your debt and put it where the sun don't shine. So that's what odious debt is, and so that's something that we'll have to look at. Maybe interesting to look at going forward. But and it's like they say, if the country, if the if the governments can print so much money, why don't they just cancel the debt? Why do we pay taxes if the countries can print money? So I mean, we really don't know what's going on inside government. All the backroom deals, all the uh, uh, all the laws and legislations, and we're only hearing a tip of the iceberg of what's going on in government. But I really think that there are really some who's really running the Bank of Canada, who's really running the government, who's really run the deception and everything is rampant. So I'm just like I said, I just want to see change, and I will do what I can to help make that change. But it's that odious debt thing. Really, hey, that would be a really cool idea. Yeah. Well, so I just
Yeah,
yeah.
you would need a prime minister that has the stones to do that.
Well, and that's just it. And the thing is that's just it. Now, uh, that would be really exciting, wouldn't it? Tell the IMF to go pound sand. Uh, but, that's I'll never be prime minister to do that. So but I can support somebody who could, and who would, and go from there. So.
I got another question about the economy. About 20% of the country is working for the government. 20% are in the public sector. Like, it's just getting bigger and bigger, and they're increasing taxes to make up for it. Like they increase the capital gains tax. What's going to happen to Canada in 50 years when like the people that produce things are just going to leave the country?
Payment. I don't think it's going to take that long. I don't. I really don't think it's going to take that long. I mean, what we're seeing is what we're witnessing is the development of a communist state. The government controls everything. And it's and I've talked to a few people who have come from communist countries, former communist countries, and it's exactly like it happened when we were young. The government got bloated, the private sector got diminished, and those that were still working, like I am, their taxes were getting increased, and so uh, it's just yeah. So I mean, it's just it's. I don't like I said. I don't think it's going to take. It's. We're seeing it now. A lot of people are leaving. Especially, we're seeing a larger brain drain heading out of country. All those with doctors and special medical professionals and lawyers, and they're going to countries that that aren't. The capital gains tax is going to kill a lot of people, especially because there won't be any investment in Canada. Um, and what we need to see is we need to see more investment in Canada by Canadians, and that's one of my things is the economic policies that Maxime is planning to bring in through the policy is that it's going to we got to reduce the taxation. That's and that'll put more money in everybody's pocket. Everybody's pocket will have more money to take care of their families, keep a roof over their head, put food on the table, and fuel in their business vehicles and transportation vehicles, and put more money in their pocket to invest in Canadian ideologies and creations and uh, technology and so on and so forth. So I'd rather see that, and until that happens, we will just continue to see a drainage. So
Jeff, I don't usually do this in my episodes, but I want to share my screen and on the issue of brain drain. Do you see this graph?
yeah,
So this is from roughly when Trudeau got elected in 2014, and the blue line. This is investment in things other than property is basically what this is. So like investment in manufacturing, automobiles, factories, businesses, like it just it disappeared in Canada.
yep, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't see better days ahead if this continues like this.
Well, then it can't continue like this, can it? It can't continue like
Definitely.
this, and the only way it's going to change is if we, the if our party, the PPC is able to make some headway. I mean, like we're seeing it's starting to happen in Europe, where the right, and I'm not saying far right, I'm saying the right, um, is making headway. Then they're starting to take countries back: Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, and I think Italy, France. Italy is going to be changing the colors, for more right than than what they're currently experiencing. I think, and the European Union is going to. I think the European Union is going to be changing guard too. It's going to be for the better. But here in Canada, I think focusing on Canada and Canadians, we definitely need you know. I'm not. I mean, all we can do is just keep trying to get our message out that we're different, and we're going to do government different. We're going to be for Canada first and Canadians first, and we're going to ensure that parents have the right to raise their families as they deem fit, provide a home for their families, put food on the table for their families, um, uh, and so on and so forth. The firearms legislation may have to go even further, and sort of become a 2A, a 2A, like the 2A amendment in the U.S. Constitution. That's another. We may have to look at developing our own constitution based on the Bill of Rights or the unalienable rights, that are that are available for reading. So it's just, but we got to start someplace, and the only that's why I joined. Was part one of the reasons why I joined PPC is because they want what's right for Canadians, not what's best, what's right. Because what's best isn't always right. Um, so
I just wanted to add one thing. I agree that all of the parties in Europe they're drifting to the right, and you know as well as I do that the mainstream media here loves to call the PPC a far right extremist party. We're not a right wing party. Like, we are completely against war, especially in Ukraine and Israel. We don't want to have anything to do with it, and we are 100% against corporate welfare, like taking tax dollars to give it to subsidized foreigners' salaries by 50%. So,
yeah,
do you want to speak to that?
yeah. No, I think you're right. I think it's, I think again, we're just more right than they are. And I think that's, but of course they want to label us so that it looks good on them. Look, they're so far right, but anybody just right to the left is far right, and so, um, I mean, the thing is, if everybody deserves to have, as our four pillars are, freedom, fairness, respect, and responsibility. Every Canadian deserves that. Every okay, every Canadian deserves that, and not new immigrants, not visitors, not Canadians come first. Seniors and veterans, deserve better than what they're getting. Families deserve better than what they're getting. Um, and but they're having those rights and freedoms. There's also comes a responsibility. Um, you know, yeah, you have the right to eat whatever you want and the freedom to eat whatever you want. But when your health goes downhill, you also have the responsibility to take care of your health. Why should somebody in Nova Scotia, worry about someone's health in British Columbia? If you, um, and healthcare, I don't look at it as healthcare. I call it sick care, because I healthy people don't need doctors and hospitals. The only time I've ever needed over the last couple of years is I needed stitches, so I had to go to the hospital. I had to have surgery. I had to go to the hospital. I'm relatively healthy, but being a healthy person, you don't need a doctor and you don't need a hospital. So they're sick care professionals, not healthcare. Healthcare to me is gyms, a proper diet, real food, vegetables and meats and everything else. And healthcare should also be that we have all the available information on health provision available to families to make informed decisions. Not telling them, well, in order for healthcare, you got to do this. In order for healthcare, you got to take that. No, that's manipulation. Um, government should be responsible to ensure that Canadians have the information needed, all the information, not just cherry picked, ideologies and concepts, that you know all the information available so that mom and dad can pick a proper, uh, healthcare, make proper healthcare decisions for their families. Uh, so
I agree with you. It's not like healthcare is kind of a misleading term. I mean, at least call it like emergency care.
yeah, yeah. Like, I mean, again, I mean, and so yeah, and I think people will get that. Like and a free healthcare. Well, I mean, how is it free if somebody has to wait 6 months or a year for a procedure? How is it free if somebody has to wait in a hallway, being exposed to various people walking by? Uh, well, I mean, that is free. You get what you paid for. Well, okay, so we didn't pay for the health care, so I have to lay here in a hospital gurney, you know, you know, looking at all these people, walk by and people passing, and then free health care. If you want to have free health care, then the health, the care staff may not respond to you in a timely manner like you feel you need. Um, they might be, so that's free healthcare. Well, if that's what you want, then have at her. But I think people need, I think there needs to be a two, a you know, a payer system to assist with the cost. So, because I think there's too many middlemen. There's hospital boards. There's the hospital. There's the hospital boards. There's the doctors. There's the nurses. There's the specialists. Um, and everybody wants a piece of their pie. So, uh,
Yeah, I never understood the public healthcare system in Canada. If instead of like a doctor, you swap the doctor out like with a pair of sneakers, like you're telling me I have to call ahead, I have to make an appointment, I got to show up and wait in a room, and then they're going to refer me to somebody else, and that somebody else is going to call me and tell me when I can come pick up my sneakers. It's not the way a free market's supposed to work.
no, no, but but it's free. But it's free.
True.
And of course everybody,
Yeah, it's free.
yeah, free,
Taxes, your taxpayers, but they funded free healthcare.
yeah, yeah. No, and the thing is like, and people, again, it's I mean, there are various, I mean, we're more privy to the American healthcare system than we are to the Swedish healthcare system. But my understanding of the Swedish healthcare system is far superior to our healthcare system, um, and they have a mix of both. And the thing is in actual fact, payment, we really have a two-tier system here in Canada. Pro athletes, the wealthy, don't wait for nothing. So if that's not two-tier system, two-tiered healthcare, then what is it? You know?
What did they do? Did they fly down to the U.S.?
Well, I mean, or they would fly somebody in. I mean, like, if
No.
if a pro athlete, is in need of something, uh, so let's say the Canucks or a BC Lion player or Canuck player take a facial injury. Do they have they're not waiting in a waiting room at VGH or wherever else to get it taken care of. They've got the first aid guy on the bench, and then they have a doctor on
Right.
call, and they have a dentist on call. And 20 minutes later, the player's back out of the bench, ready to play again. You know, so and for the wealthy, I mean, if people, the wealthy, don't wait for anything. I mean, they pay for everything. Um, so why is that? So we already have a two-tiered system here in Canada. I mean, people just don't talk about it because they don't get it. If a wealthy person had to wait in a waiting room as long as the average Canadian. Well, so they don't wait. They don't wait.
Yeah, they would probably lobby the government to change that
Mm-hmm.
law
Well,
instantly.
and they don't, do they? They don't, because they just fly to wherever they can. They'll fly to Mexico, or they'll fly to California, they'll fly to New York, or they'll fly, and make us pay the carbon tax on their
I was just gonna say, yeah, they'll fly a private jet
yeah.
and tell some dumb farmer for having a Ford F-150 that you did this. Yeah. How dare you?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So
Well, Jeff, that's a good note to end on, carbon tax. We're at the end of the episode, Jeff. Where can people go to find out more about you? What's your social media handles?
yeah, uh, Jeff Galbraith at Fraser Valley PPC.ca. I'm on I'm on Twitter. I'm on X, as they call it now. I'm on Facebook. But yeah, I mean, Jeff Galbraith, Fraser Valley at Fraser Valley PPC.ca, and we'll start from there, and yeah.
Well, Mr. Galbraith, I want to thank you very much for making the time and coming on.
Payman, thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and get to know you a little bit, and you know, and for you, young man, okay, like I said, I'm 62. Everybody that's younger than me, I call young man. But to come from Iran and to do this is awesome. This is awesome, man, and this is just like I'm proud of you. I mean, I'm proud of you. I mean, like, good for you. Good for you. Um, so appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words.
Okay, man.
Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye bye.